Good morning and welcome to Travels with Monkey Boy. Today we are on day 7 of our journey to Scotland. We left off yesterday in Shetland Islands, and we're going to be driving through the islands and heading back towards the Orkney Islands. April Fool's Day 1999. I woke Jillreen up early, 5:45 a.m. I explained to her that I had a new quest and wanted her to come with me. Marcia had told me the previous day that we could see seals and sea otters all around the island, but in fact, if we left early, we would have the best chance to see them. So we snuck out of the house early. As we were leaving, we stopped Marcia for a minute from mopping out the laundry room. No, not really. She had really finished by midnight the night before, and asked her if she would mind putting on the TV for the kids when they woke up. We drove the 5 miles into Hillswick, parked the car, hopped over a farmer's fence, and started walking along the cliffs near Hillswick. I say hopped over a farmer's fence because Shetland is unusual in that it has the right of free passage. Every cliff in the country seems to be within some farmer's fenced land, but people have the right to trespass wherever and whenever they want. And the cliffs were beautiful, really lovely. And Jilreen and I had a nice walk. We tried to be very quiet because Marcia told us that otters were very skittish and would leave at the first sound. They were much harder to find, but we would likely see seals because they were just littered all over the island. Well, we walked and we walked and we walked. At one little cove, we did see an animal that had just dove into the water and was swimming away from us, but all we could see was the tip of its nose, and it could have been a sheep for all we could tell. After a little more than an hour hiking, Jillian said it was time to head back. I explained that we were on a loop and it would be best if we finished it. She said that she had heard that yesterday and she was going back straight across the farmer's field. This time the direct route wasn't the best plan. The field was so wet, we sunk 6 inches into watery mud every step we took. It also took us more time to get back than it did coming. Plus, we had no beautiful scenery or seals to look for. But by 8:30 we were back and had worked up tremendous appetite. Marcia had a delicious breakfast for us and we began to pack. Our flight out was at 3 p.m. and we had no real plans, so we just drove and explored. At first I said that we should drive to that special cove where Frankie and I had visited the first day, but Frankie said no, that was her and her dad's special place and no one else could see it. So I had a few other spots to visit and we slowly headed south. One of the things you see as you drive through Shetlands is great chunks of the earth cut out. This was peat. Marcia had taken us to the back of her property to show us what bags of peat look like. They looked like bags of dirt, by the way. She also explained to us that the smell all over the island was the smell of peat fires, and that most Shetlanders still heated their homes with peat. I asked if peat was like a plant or something, and she explained that it was like ancient compressed plants, much like coal, but not with the hard consistency. But I said, this stuff must grow. And she said, no, that it was ancient. So now it comes to my mind, you have an island made out of peat. And for 1,000 years, you islanders have been cutting up the peat and using it for heat. Don't you at some point use up your island? I mean, if you lived on an island made of chocolate chip cookie dough and you love chocolate chip cookie dough, at some point in your history or your descendants' history, if you didn't change your eating practices, you'd eat yourself underwater. I mean, wouldn't you? But the Shetlanders continued to merrily burn their peat, and since this island was unlikely to be underwater by 3 o'clock that afternoon, I decided not to worry about it. On the way to the airport, we stopped just to look at the castle of the Hillsdale Castle. This was the castle of one of the crazy Stuarts. They said under his reign, the locks of Shetland ran with blood. They didn't offer up much besides that story, and as this was 500 years ago and there was limited evidence left, we moved on. Right outside of the airport was an ancient Stone Age housing settlement. It was actually quite interesting. It wasn't Skara Brae, but kind of Skara Brae's younger brother. But what was interesting about this place was that it had been used for thousands of years. The Vikings built onto the old Stone Age ruins, and later farmers added on to that. On this day, it was windy and cold and made it hard to imagine these people living on these wind-whipped cliffs 2,000 years ago. We went to the airport a little early, returned our rental car, and ate lunch at, again, a surprisingly nice Sumburgh Airport Cafe. I couldn't help but feel as our plane was lifting off and heading forever away from Shetland, that those little bastard puffins were swimming on shore up at the Unst Bird Sanctuary. By the time we landed in the Orkneys and found our hotel for the night, it was 5 p.m. Our ferry left at 8 a.m. the next morning, so our only chance to see the Orkneys was in the next few hours. So I roasted the family out of their hotel comfort and told them we were going for a city walking tour. Kirkwall is a charming old seafaring city. It is famous for a 1,000-year-old cathedral in the square, which was closed. It was also famous for an old castle that was also owned by the same crazy steward that was in Shetland. To our good fortune, though, the sign said it was closed, that it would close at 6. And there was no one selling tickets any longer, as it was 5:55. But the castle doors were open. Alex and I went inside while Jilreen kept hissing at us that it was closed. Soon Alex and I were walking through dungeon number 1, then dungeon number 2. We read a story about how this king had ground up the bones and hair and blood of the residents to make the mortar for his castle. Alex was quite impressed by this, though he wanted to know how blood and flesh could equal mortar. I had a hard time with that one, so we went on. As we were going into dungeon number 5, we began hearing this distant clank, clank sound. He said, "Dad, I think they're locking the doors." I said, Then into dungeon number 6, we heard more clank, 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 clank. Alex said, "Dad, I really think they're locking the doors." I said, Suddenly into dungeon number 7, I heard this clank, clank, clank sound and said, "Alex, they're locking the doors." So we raced up the steps, and just as the woman was closing the main castle door, we shouted, "Wait!" She apologized and said she hadn't seen anyone go in, and though she thought that she heard whispers down in the dungeons, she didn't want to investigate, maybe ghosts. She said it was lucky we caught her when we did, or we would have spent the night locked in the castle. On our coming out, Jilreen and Frankie looked more than a little disappointed. After that, we investigated the cemetery across the street and then began wandering around looking for dinner. We settled in a quite nice Indian restaurant and then finished off the day with Orkney ice cream. Very good. At the hotel next to ours. We went right to bed because tomorrow was a big day. Okay, that's the story for today. Hope you tune in again tomorrow. Bye now.